To us, magic sounds like this extraordinary thing, pulling a rabbit out of the hat, coming out of nowhere. But it's here, it's real, and the more that we are open to the unseen, to the energies of this world, to abundance and manifesting, to calling in and growing, the more we'll be able to call magic into our lives. Join me as I share stories, wisdom, and curiosity around connecting with your higher frequency, tapping into the synchronicities of the universe, and opening up to the unseen possibilities that this world has to offer. I am your host, Dayna Faye, and this is the Ordinary Magic Podcast. Libby, welcome to Ordinary Magic. I am so excited to have you on today to share your expertise as a coach and also to share your personal experience around the topic of change. I really want to bring change up for our listeners because it is something that we have all been through, that we are going through, and that is going to continue happening for the rest of our life. So my goal today is for the listener to leave this episode feeling less lonely on their journey. So Libby is a coach. She guides impact-driven women to discover, create, and own their power with ease. Her program is called Gold Wave, and it's not your average coaching program. It's a creative healing experience that uses science, somatics, and spirituality to build momentum and profound change. Look at that. You have change in your description of who you are. I'm so excited to dive into that today. Libby is an intuitive with a mission to see women explode with freedom to be themselves and create from that place. And when that happens, magic occurs. So, Libby, I am so excited to have you on today, not only because you're a phenomenal coach, and I know that because I have a friend who has worked with you and she's had amazing results, but also learning just a little bit about your story. You've been through a lot of change in seemingly a short amount of time. If you feel comfortable, would you share how old you are and what type of changes you have already walked through in your human experience?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm 31. I've been through a lot of big pivotal changes that I call my plot points. And I have maybe at this point 6 of them that mark major moments of transformation. I think we're changing every day. And I don't feel any different than anybody else in this world in terms of going through a lot of change. I think all of us are all the time, whether we are choosing it or not choosing it. Life continues on no matter what we want it to do. So the changes that I've been through are all sort of themed around my emotional well-being, my physical health, my relationships, locations, like places that I've lived around the world that have been really pivotal in making me who I am today. And sobriety is in that journey, addictions in that journey, health issues, autoimmune diseases, relationships, building and ending, commitments, and really the through line that's in all of these changes is surrender. Because I was brought to a point with all of these shifts in my life, I had to completely trust and let go in order to move through it and to allow the next chapter to come. So we're all changing all the time, but I have grown more familiar to change and more welcoming to change and excited by it, because the fear and the resistance just made it harder. So I'm a little more comfortable with lifting up my legs and kind of floating downstream with it now. Doesn't mean that they're not hard shifts, but my relationship to change has changed a lot.
That's amazing. And what really brought this topic up for me is I was thinking it's 2024 now, right? And for some reason, I think about my life in like high school chunks.
Yeah.
Like my 4 years of high school felt like it was an eternity. And so when I review things in my life, I was like, oh my God, that was 4 years. That was a high school. And so one of the biggest changes that happened to all of us collectively at the same time was the pandemic.
in 2020. And so I feel like that's a different category because, like you said, we're all changing all the time. And some of those big pivot moment changes were huge, and we can really feel that. And maybe when that happens, we have people around us to lean on. But in 2020, a change happened that was out of our control, and we all went through it at the same time. And I'm wondering how many of us really stopped to integrate that yet? Because life goes on. And at least for a lot of my friends, they were having babies for the first time during that time. So they're raising kids right now. I don't think a lot of people have stopped and reflected on how did that change affect me? And when you mentioned you've just gotten better at surrendering now and holding less fear, I would say that there was a lot of energetic fear during that time. So as you've been working through clients for the past few years, how has that time, 2020, shown up in their lives? And how have they transmuted that into, moving forward?
I love that you're acknowledging that. I hear it more like a joking way, like, God, can you believe we all went through that? and not so much of a, hold on, we were collectively traumatized. And our nervous systems are likely not all regulated still from that experience. That was a whiplash, happened in a matter of hours kind of thing that lasted a lot longer than anyone was expecting. And that is a trauma. And I don't think a lot of us even want to use that word. You don't have to use that word, but it was that intense. So I hope that's validating for anybody who's like, well, everybody else seems to have gotten their shit together, so I guess I'll just move forward. I was working with a couple clients at that time, but mind you, I, in 2020, had made a big decision in my own life where I actually had to put my business on pause. So I wasn't working with clients as much during COVID because in 2020, I decided after 15 years of struggling with ulcerative colitis and trying every treatment I knew of under the sun, to my knowledge, with no success, I decided to get my colon removed. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time. I'd been living there for a couple years. And I knew that I had to go home to Philadelphia where my family was to get this procedure done because it's a very invasive 3-stage process. And it was going to take at least a year of my life to really slow down and heal and rest and put everything on pause. So for me, it wasn't so much with clients, but I knew in the collective and in my community and with people around me that there was a very profound spiritual impact on everyone I know during that time. And not many of us really got the lessons in the moment. That's not really how it even works. It's not usually until after the fact. But what I've seen in at least those who are willing to see it, draw an awareness of what the lessons were and what the wisdom was, is that it actually transformed them for the better because it had them looking at things that maybe they wouldn't have looked at before. It brought up a lot of discomforts and pains for so many of us, so many triggers that maybe we wouldn't have looked at if this hadn't happened. It threw many of us into total survival mode, and some people are still kind of crawling out of that, but it was an opportunity for everyone to look at their life, lay it all out on the table, look through it, and rebuild. And sometimes the universe, as wild and powerful as it is, does that for us so that we have an opportunity to make the changes that maybe we wouldn't have done on our own, or would have taken us a little longer. We would have sat in a little longer. I just know so many people. I mean, I could go on and on about the stories that I've heard who were in relationships they needed to get out of, who needed to get sober, who needed to move, who needed to be with their parent that was passing away, that they wouldn't have had these moments with each other if they weren't forced out of something or into something. So I think for a lot of us, there were many spiritual, emotional, and personal lessons that happened. And I really commend everybody who took on that assignment, because I know it was scary for many of us. But I think what's important, and that I'll say to the listener, is that even if you feel like, oh, well, I'm still in a rough spot, or I don't really feel like I gained that much from it, just think of what your life was like and who you were maybe in 2019, and reflect on all that you have moved through so far. It doesn't have to be tangible accomplishments that you've created for yourself, but maybe acknowledge some of the things that you let go of that you're better for today. Maybe just notice some of the things that have made you stronger from this experience, and know that it was all happening for you.
And there comes the surrender. Yeah. Wow. So, in your personal experience, when you were going through all these changes, relationships, sobriety, your health, how did your mind play a role in those? And was there one pivot point that the mind was a little bit more tricky with than another one?
Oh gosh. I mean, with how did the mind play a role? That's such an interesting question, because I come onto these podcasts that are like leaned more wellness or spiritual, and they'll be like, what did your heart say? What did your gut say? My mind was like, girl, you can't do that. What are you talking about? My mind was like doubtful and like not kind and criticizing, and was really kind of rubbing up against my heart and gut and intuition, because that's the place in my body that's trying to keep me safe. So it's sort of the last line of defense that I try to listen to when I'm called to surrender, because it's the part of me that is in protection mode, the defense, the one that's just trying to make sure I'm okay. Because our brains are designed to keep us safe. They're designed to look for what's familiar and avoid what isn't. So when I'm in a place of change, my brain's like, no, we better not do that. And then come up with a million reasons why that's a horrible idea. But I have gotten to make friends with that part of me and hear it out, and then get very curious about why do you think that we can't do this? Or why do you think that this is a bad idea? And when I ask all the questions and follow it all the way down, it just takes me back always to a time when I was very young and a similar feeling came up. And that was the thought that kept me safe, that protected me. And so I just have to kind of update my mental system to kind of wire it to know that, hey, you're an adult today. You don't need that thought anymore. You're safe to move forward. And that's how I navigate those thoughts. I have to like really drop in and go to this place and try to lead from my heart.
I love that you're recognizing that you're an adult today, but at one point you were younger and the mind kind of came in and you did listen to it, you're saying.
Yeah, that's where most of our, if you have a, call it whatever you want, a limiting belief or a thought in your mind that is doubting yourself, it's likely a belief that was developed between the ages of 0 and 7, when your subconscious was developing and you were kind of learning about the world and you were looking at your caretakers and what was happening around you, and that defined your worldview. And that's, we spend the rest of our lives, if we are committed to this path, deconditioning that. And it's really important just for us to have that awareness of, oh, okay, that's not the present and true truth. That's something that little scared me is believing. But the capital T truth, I have to kind of like have compassion for that part of me that's feeling this way, and really come back to the wisest place in me that really knows that no matter what, everything's okay. Because even in my most painful moments, when my heart was breaking and I thought it was going to kill me, literally thought that, when I come back to the wisdom place in my body, like that's where I source my strength from today. I have to really be conscious that I don't listen to what my brain is telling me most of the time. They are lies, or it's old stuff from an older operating system.
I love that frame of reference. So for those people who are just starting to tune into their intuition and just starting to feel their body lead the way, how do they recognize the difference between the mind keeping them safe and actually their compass from within?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And the simplest way that I can answer that is that your inner guidance system, your intuition, your inner knowing doesn't have a reason. It doesn't explain itself. Your mind will be explaining itself. No, you can't do that because like this and this and this and this and that, and you'll hear a lot of noise. But when you just get the knowing or the hit or the color or the feeling or the thought, intuition shows up differently for everyone, but it's just a simple knowing. The mind is what overcomplicates it. And you can get the simple knowing and then have fear around that feeling because, oh shit, I know I have to leave this relationship. This is not right. I've been trying to justify it, blah, blah, blah. Whoa, I have this knowing. We have to be aware that the brain is a protective mechanism and a mechanism, right? It's like actually a beautiful, incredible machine that inspires creativity, that solves problems, that remembers things, like carries our language, helps us communicate, not just say that our minds like are just liars and horrible to us. They're so useful for those things. But when it comes to knowing what's next or knowing what's right for you, what's correct for you, what's healthy for you, what's sparkling on your path, that's just like a very simple knowing inside. So I hope that's helped some people. I've heard before too, people explaining it that intuition feels a little expansive, but still a little edge of that scary fear, but it's mostly expansive. Fear or something kind of coming from the mind is going to feel like tight, like a contraction. So I would say someone who's just tuning into their intuition, just practice listening to your body so that you know what yours feels like. And my favorite exercise to offer clients and for myself is to keep an intuition journal, or like in your notes app, if you have your phone with you most of the time, if you get an intuitive hit about something or just a feeling that could be so simple, like it's going to rain tomorrow, or something where it's all coming from your inner knowing, write it in a notes app or in a journal and date it. And then in a week, look back on all those hits that you had and you'll see that they were true. It's kind of like we doubt ourselves because if we can't see it, we won't believe it. So the writing it down provides evidence and proof to like see to believe that we're fucking right. We're right. Especially the women out there. Like we know, we always know. And that women's intuition is terrifying to some people. And they will try to stamp it out and make us, not believe in ourselves. And it's the most powerful, liberating thing for a woman to not only honor it, hear it, and move forward on it, but to not try to justify and explain it to anybody else around her because it doesn't matter. This is my choice and I know it's correct and I'm moving forward on it.
Yes.
Because when we're doubting, right? Like when we're doubting, we go to our friends, we're like, is this a good idea? Blah, blah, blah. And that's great. Throw it around, kick it around. But at the end of the day, you're the one who knows. And you can trust that and you can trust yourself.
I resonate so much. I've had a moment just a couple weeks ago where I was like, I am so done with asking for advice from other people. I frickin' know. I know. So why? It's like we're trained to think we don't know, but our truth is so within us. And the more that we decondition, the more we're in tune with that. And yes, women especially, we are all more psychic than we give ourselves credit. And I did do that notes app practice a couple months ago in preparation for a mediumship training that I was in. And it took me by surprise. Like you said, the little things, they were just like a thought that would come to me one day. And then the next day something would happen that was that thought. And I didn't even think to write that thought down. And kind of like an extreme example from last week. I was dropping my daughter off at daycare and one of the teachers had announced a couple weeks ago that she was pregnant. And when I was leaving daycare, she works in a different office. I don't normally think anything, but I just had a thought that I think, I'm like, I wonder if she lost her baby. And then 2 days later, an email came out announcing that sadly she lost her baby. And I,
Wow.
I just had to think, I could rationalize it like, oh, my brain thought there wasn't a big bump or something like that. But there was no reason why I was thinking that.
Sure.
I passed her in the hallway and I had this kind of just like feeling. I don't know. And 2 days later, we got that email and I took a moment and paused for her and was just like, obviously really sad for her and realized how incredibly connected we really all are when we really connect to that intuition deep within us.
That story gives me chills because we are all connected. We're all extensions of the same source. So, of course, we can tune into that web with anyone, but there's something very different about a woman to woman intuitive connection. I mean, the amount of times, like, I know these listeners, I know you've all had this experience. You're thinking about your friend, boom, you get a phone call. In that exact second, it is like, deep down, there's no possible way that was a coincidence. And it's happened so many times that at this point, we are freaking tapped into something else.
Yes, literally last week, I have an example of this. Starting on Monday, I knew I was going home with my daughter to my hometown to visit. And all week I thought, should I reach out to my friend Ashley? Should I reach out to her to see if she wants to go out Friday night or hang out? And I didn't end up doing it because I was just busy with my daughter and, bedtime routine and all those things. Friday night at 8:30 p.m., which Ashley and I don't talk that often, she texted me and said, "Hey, I'm reading in bed and you just popped in my mind. I have no idea why. How are you? How have you been?" I was like, you are so telepathic. I was thinking about hanging out with you tonight at literally this is when we would start hanging out.
So I'll share another fun, really fun intuitive exercise if you're trying to beef that up. Think about a circle of your friends and just close your eyes for a moment and scan through the friends and just see if anything pops up about any of your friends. And then number one, you go to text this friend, but you ask for consent to share your intuitive hit always. And secondly, never share an intuitive hit over text message that would be as deep as, the example that you shared. It's something like, if you saw a purple flower when you thought of this friend, text them that. Can I share an intuitive hit? Does a purple flower mean anything to you? Keep it very light and respectful and nothing heavy, but it's a great practice. And it's fun because you can encourage your friends to do the same thing for you. Sometimes it means absolutely nothing. They have no idea what you're talking about. It doesn't matter. Keep it moving. But every once in a while, they're like, what? What's going on? And that's another way to affirm and confirm your intuitive hits. But what I really want for the people listening is to also know that while the proof is really fun and helpful and helps our brains, get into more trust, you don't need that. You do know, and that's enough. What you were sharing before of maybe you are trusting that hit, you know that it's right, but you still ask around. That's again something in us that is saying, I still don't totally trust myself. Because maybe there was a decision that I made before that wasn't right or didn't pan out. But that doesn't mean that your intuition wasn't right in that moment. It meant that the journey was over, right? Or the journey had something to teach you. And so I wish we would second guess ourselves less. And, as I've heard before, do it for the plot. We're not alive for very long, let's live. As long as we are living with compassion and we're not doing any harm, we spend so much time. And this is what I work with my clients on, because they're coming to me to create change in their life and in the world. That's my criteria. I want them to come willing to see things differently and want to go through that transformation. But also I take on clients that want to make the world a better place somehow. So that's their mission. They have to have a personal mission, because I want just a network of women just rippling out this impact by coming into their full power and full ownership of their freedom. So if we just kept it moving, the amount of times that my clients will, and myself, will sit in the mind sphere of like, oh, I can't like take that leap. Or I'm sure you felt that way starting this podcast. Like, am I really going to do this? And being nervous about that and fearing judgments from other people, like that would be very healthy and normal to experience. And then when you just move forward and you do it and you see that you're still okay, you just keep it moving. I just want to see women in flow, not getting jammed up by something that they believe that isn't even true.
Yeah. And one of those changes that happens is your spiritual awakening, your change to these series of unfoldings that is not really in your control. When did that start to happen for you, and what were you going through in your life at that time?
Well, the first real time that ever happened, and probably the most profound experience that I've had to date, was the day that I decided to get sober. I was 23 years old and just out of college, and I had started drinking and experimenting with drugs at like 12 years old. And it's not rare for people who struggle with addiction to have started really, and it runs in my family. It's a family disease, and I spent many years just blacking out. I was a binge drinking blackout alcoholic. So I didn't necessarily drink every day, which was one of the ways that I justified, like, well, I can't be an alcoholic because alcoholics drink every day and they drink vodka from the bottle first thing in the morning. And it's like, actually, no, it can look a lot of different ways. But the one thing that I really had to come to terms with, that once I started, I really did not have any control over it, and I couldn't stop. And there were so many rock bottom moments where I really could have gotten sober, but I was not ready yet. And I can't explain why my last day was my last day, but it was a very spiritual experience. I had a really dark weekend of using drugs and drinking, and it was a bender. It was like multiple days in a row, music festival, and something that wasn't always typical, that when I drank, I would black out and I looked like I was awake and talking to you, but like nobody was home. And I kept going. Like I'd be the last one up. I never threw up. I never passed out. Like I'd be the last one up at 9 a.m. still. I'd look around. Everybody went home. Like, okay, I guess I'll go home. So it was rare for me to pass out. And on the last day of my drinking, I passed out in a crowd and was lifted up in a stretcher out towards the medic tent and to a hospital. And I hardly remember any of this. I just woke up the next day with a hospital bracelet on in a strange home, a friend of a friend who was able to take care of me, who lived nearby. And I opened up my eyes and I just felt this calm come over me. And I heard, "It's okay to be done." And it was just this, I don't know where that voice came from. Today I like to call it, creative, loving source energy. Like that was absolutely God, the universe. And it really was. It was okay to be done. And I knew that it was over. And I called up my mom, and she had been waiting for this phone call for a really long time. And my life completely changed after that. And I haven't had a drink or a drug in 7 years. And I've been able to develop my spirituality even more because I've let those things go that I was using to kind of block me off from the rest of the world. I had a buffer around me that just kind of, I felt a lot safer in that kind of fuzzy, numb feeling. And now being sober, I have no choice but to feel all the feelings. And thank God, because now when I go through a heartbreak or something really challenging happens, I can be with those feelings now. And they move through me so much quicker. I think about a heartbreak I went through when I was drinking in college, and it probably took me like 5 years to get over him because I was drinking and I wasn't feeling it all. And then going through it in sobriety, so painful, and like you have to be there for it. And I really used all my tools, and it just moved through me. And they all told me, this will pass, this pain will pass, it will, it will, it will. and I thought I was going to die from the pain. And then like one day felt a little better, and the next day felt a little better. And now I'm talking to you totally fine and like so happy that I went through that and so informed by that pain. It was such a beautiful experience to be alive and to be able to enjoy the spectrum of human emotions. They're constantly teaching us. So I'm really grateful for all of those, and the physical pains too. Going through those surgeries and having an autoimmune disease, but that experience taught me what ease is really supposed to look like, what real rest and relaxation and boundaries and self-care is actually supposed to look like, not just what a couple Instagram posts told me that it's supposed to look like. So I'm grateful for all of those really painful times. And if you're in a painful time right now, anyone listening, you don't need to know any of this stuff yet. But if you're feeling it all and being present with it, processing it, eventually you'll know exactly why all of this happened and reap the benefits of pain, because it's really like the best teacher.
Thank you so much for sharing your story in that. And I want to bring it back to the drinking. I don't have the same story as you, but I resonate very much with starting very young and doing the blackout drinking every weekend, looking forward to it. And I feel like when I reflect back on it, like you said, that was such a great way to explain it, that buffer in between not having to emote and feel. And I tie that back to my childhood, where my upbringing and just culture, we were still in that phase of, I always say you could be two things, happy or hardworking. Like if you're mad, go to your room. If you're crying, go to your room. Don't be a girl, toughen up. That was kind of my upbringing. And so I think two things happened when I got to let go with drinking. And that was, first, I got to be fully me and emote. And second, I got to be spirited, which now learning, especially my human design, putting words behind it, like have very spirited energy. I sometimes want to be very excited and spirited. And alcohol, I think, allowed me to do that. And living in the Midwest, it's in so many people's lives. And just looking ahead for my daughter's generation, do you think that if we allow them to be in touch with their feelings, if we okay the fact that they can be angry, they can be sad, and if we talk to them more about it, do you think that will have a correlation to hopefully them not needing the alcohol and drugs when they're stepping through their formative years?
I wholeheartedly believe that. And there's not a whole lot we can do about the predisposition to the disease that is alcoholism, right? Like in my family, it's genetic. So lots of us have it. And that, especially when people in the program get together or two alcoholics get together, a high probability that child might have that genetic disease. But when we can show them a healthy way to, our emotions flow freely through us and it's all okay and we're safe and this is safe, the probability of them coming to you and saying, I have a problem and I want to change it is much, much higher versus them being sick in the disease for a long time. So that's with the genetic predisposition. With just our culture and how much alcohol is valued, I so believe that connection and permission to be who you are and your authenticity will totally prevent addictive behavior or anything like that, because the root of addiction, it's not alcohol that's the problem. It's a lack of connection that's the problem. It's pain that's the problem. So that's why, in 12-step programs, it's all about coming together in community and being vulnerable together and doing the inner work. Because I can act alcoholically without booze around. Like I can be impulsive and emotionally rash. Like I could do all of that if I weren't really working on myself. So there's so much hope for younger generations as long as we are creating a safe environment for them.
And bringing that back to what you said before about when you were going through your year after your surgery and really learned what it meant to slow down and like actually rest. I'm laughing because I'm in a place right now where I can only get there. I can tell when I need it. My body's telling me I need it because I overeat. And then I like chill out. And then when I'm chilling out from like a full stomach, I go, I have this epiphany where I'm like, oh my God, I just needed to chill out. I didn't need to eat first to do that.
Well, that's so normal, right? Like we go to like, I am feeling discomfort. Let me do something that will soothe me before like, oh, what I needed was, and sometimes that's like, again, like these are all vehicles that direct us closer back to ourselves. That's so, I totally identify with that and relate to that. And it's funny too, because I think I told you this when we were talking before, but I came home with the intention that I would be healing for a year. And I had my colon removed, and then I had a colostomy bag for 6 months. And then I had another surgery to remove the bag and restructure my small intestine to be my new, like, full system. Those are 3 very intense surgeries. And in my mind, I thought a year would be plenty. And turns out it wasn't. That was what the surgeon was telling me. That was what the doctors were telling me. You know, people think that, oh, well, you know, you went through a breakup. That's so stupid rule that probably came out of the 80s that was like,
Yeah.
it takes you half the time that you were together to get over that, or like whatever rules that people say, you'll be over it in a couple months or in a year, whatever. There are no rules about your healing time. Your healing takes as long as it takes. And we have to let go of the end, like of the finish line that we think should be there. I had my surgery in 2021. It's 2024, and I still feel like I'm healing from it. Especially, you know, big surgeries, or think about the things that we're still healing from childhood. There's just no time limit to be done with this kind of thing. Life is a healing journey. What the surgery taught me was that I have to give myself so much more grace when I'm in a healing period. The reparenting that has to happen of just like, it's okay. What are we in a rush for? What's the urgency for? Probably to get out of ourselves, right? So like, healing is the process of being able to sit with ourselves and sit with that discomfort and like know that it takes as long as it takes. And if it takes 5 years to heal from something, then that's beautiful. I always think like, all right, I've got it with my boundaries. Like I'm set. I totally nailed it. And then something will come in and I'll be like, okay, gotta beef that one up. Gotta get, and it's with myself, right? Like they're for me to keep myself safe. There were a couple things I had to come to terms with recently that not just because of my health, but just because of the person I am. I feel very sensitive to stimulation. I feel like I need a lot more rest, a lot more alone time. And I finally came to terms with the fact that maybe I don't need to be going on fish tour, you know, anymore. Like going to concerts and being up really late or being out with friends really late. Maybe I have a different lifestyle now. And so there's a grieving process with that. It's not to say I'll never be doing that again, but to really give myself the self-love that I deserve, I have to do what feels best in my body, and that might disappoint people. It might not be what I put my identity around. It might be really uncomfortable to be the only one or the odd one out or whatever. But at this point, nothing is worth sacrificing my peace for.
And
Nothing.
your health.
And my health.
Nothing. If you
Right.
don't have that, I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking about a lot of my women entrepreneur friends who may have the fear, maybe their business won't flourish as much, or they won't, you know, it's like always keeping up. What would you say to them? Are you proof that you can slow down and still run your business?
Absolutely. And I would say, so my mission and what I am most called to do at this point in my career is to help women that are high performing or highly driven, highly motivated. And I don't just mean in the Western sense of the career way. I mean the one that thinks they have to be doing it all, right? Like with the kids, with the job, with the partners, with the whatever it is, like all of the forcing that we put ourselves through to be enough. Not only does that burn us out, but that takes us so much farther away from our magic, which is 10 million times more powerful, creating like results than the doing, right? So my process is a lot about helping women be in the being of their experience and tapping into the magic. And it is magic. Like women are designed to birth things into the world. So ideas, projects, new ways of being, new ways of doing things, human beings, we're portals to new life and new experiences. And so when we can return to that and remember that about ourselves, we can get into this energy of divine feminine power, where the less we do and the more we are in our receiving mode, in our peace, in our bliss, in our sensuality, our play, our childlike wonder, our healed self, shit just comes flying in. And so I don't believe that we're all like working so hard because we think that's what's going to yield results. I think we're working so hard so we don't have to be in that. So we can like get away from our inner selves. There's a lot of stuff happening there. So the more women can free themselves up to just be this magical being, like we're just capable of so much more when we're in our natural state, which is that flow state that I mentioned. So yeah, I love working with women who have a big mission, but helping them return to their nature in executing it. Because if we're trying to do it the masculine way, we will be denying certain powers that we have, putting our health at risk, and blocking ourselves off from a major power source that we have. So it's pretty cool when a woman can do that.
It's so cool. And we all know what that looks and feels like. And I feel like that brings us back to our conversation about the mind. And I challenge all the women out there to think about, where is your mind jumping in and telling you that you want certain things, or that you want to run your business a certain way, or that in order to be successful, you have to be doing everything, or XYZ. Like, where is your mind telling you you want something? But if you actually, like you said, sit within and be in your being, where is the truth of actually what you are interested in? Like your example of, well, maybe I'm not in the season of going to Fish concerts anymore. Even though I knew that was my identity, right now I'm not in that season. And I think if more women stop to smell the roses and honor perhaps not being in a season or a certain identity that they used to be in, they will be able to take those baby steps into their divine feminine.
We're just constantly evolving. And there's growing pains with that, especially moving from the maiden into motherhood, or just kind of making a shift. I know you can relate to it as a manifesting generator, right? For those listening, I'm sure they know about human design.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So Libby and I are both MGs. We're both emotional authorities as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, that has really helped me so much in accepting the pivots. Like, I know that part of why I'm here is to like help redefine change and kind of bring more excitement to it, because it means you're alive. The lack of change is, in science, it means death. Like if it's not changing, it's dead. So it means that we're alive. And so how can we bring more aliveness in? it's through challenges, it's through discomfort, it's through expansion. And it's through like really being with ourselves and being with others and following our own paths, be in our truth.
Yeah. And that is the journey of a manifesting generator. And it's one of our core wounds is that we don't know the end result, that we live a very nonlinear life and our path looks a little bit jagged and all over the place. But the more that we surrender to that path and let go of what the outcome is going to be, the more surprised and fulfilled and satisfied we will feel as we reach each new level. And we never get to the top. It's just the next change and the next level. And how exciting is that?
Yeah, it's so exciting. I think about it like a frog on a lily pad, just like hopping from one thing to the next and like just being able to be with all of the women who I've already been and who I will become. It's just so beautiful because there's gifts on every lily pad. There's like gifts along the way.
And that brings us back to taking action. Like you said in the beginning, like, let's just take action instead of being paralyzed in that fear state and not doing anything.
Yeah. And take inspired action, right? Like that's the difference too. There is inspired action to me feels like that being and doing together. It's that like, I'm feeling that this is the next right thing that I should do. And I'm going to do it. I make that distinction only because I myself have been like, I gotta just get into action. I gotta like act. I gotta like move. And sometimes I'll go to that out of fear. Like, well, I just have to do something. And that's like when I can stray from my truth. So inspired action and listening and taking your time, even if you don't have emotional authority, like take your time to hear your own truth before moving forward on it. That's inspired action. And that's really hard to do because the mind comes in with a doubt and we want to ask this person and this person, do you think it's a good idea? But practice trusting yourself and you'll see that you're always okay. And it's a really beautiful practice and it's an ongoing lifelong practice too. Like we don't just get this right away and then we're constantly remembering and forgetting. That's what this is all about. And that's why it's okay if someone's feeling out of alignment listening to this podcast right now, like, well, I don't know what I want to be doing. I don't know what my next right action or my inspired action is. That's okay because when you get it again, which you will, you pop back on the tracks and you get into alignment again, like the gift of getting back in feels so good. And we can't be on the tracks the whole time. That's not what life is. And we would never know the joy of how good it feels to be clicked in. We'd just be clicked in all the time. So it's that contrast. It's that being off and then coming back, which is like one of the joys of being alive too.
So inspiring and so joyful. Thank you so much for this conversation today, Libby. Where can listeners find you?
You can find me on my Instagram, libby.christenson, and at goldwavecoaching.com.
Thank you so much, Libby. This has been so transformative. I am going to definitely take some lessons in slowing down, sitting with myself, waiting for that inspiration, and then taking action from there. I wish all the other women luck out there with really embracing their true, authentic selves and surrendering to the pivot points of their lives.
Thank you.
Ordinary Magic is a Lit Path Studios production, produced by Jamie Gale and Dayna Faye. Music is by Shane Ivers. Until next time, I wish you many powerful moments of ordinary magic.